Mental Health Awareness Week just is run by the Mental Health Foundation. And they choose the theme. So it's been a week which was founded about 20 years ago. And the rationale behind nature was really what the evidence showed in relation to nature at all times has a positive impact on our psychological and emotional well-being, being outside, connecting with nature, movement, that relationship between body, mind and the universe is really important. But also what the evidence also showed was that it's been even more important in the context of a pandemic, that for a lot of people, that real limited activity, the opportunity to get out. So for almost 50% of people, their daily walk was seen as a core sort of part of maintaining their mental health over the last year. So that was the sort of the key starting point, I think, for doing, and also trying to remind people that often when we think about nature, we think about rural settings, but actually, we have opportunities to connect with nature, wherever we live, whether that's in the in the city, in the suburbs, or in the countryside. And I guess the sort of the bigger context of that, of course, is that we also know that the world needs looking after a bit more, and that we know that sort of connection into nature, whilst it promotes the feelings of well-being, there's also that sense of responsibility as we understand and learn and connect more with nature, which is also really important for our well-being as well. That responsibility to lean in and to look after our natural habitats, our natural environments, is also an important part for our well-being too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think during lockdown, obviously we're starting to come out of it now, but there was a sense of kind of people, having to go back to basics, but going back to basics in a sense of how to look after themselves as well. And I suppose that must have been a big part of that.
Yeah, I think it is the combination of the whole range of things. But we know, like lots of us, are not leaving our houses in order to get to work. So that sort of sense of during that working day of being able to get out or connect, to look around, whether that's walking, having walk and talk meetings, and all that sort of sense of movement, but also connectedness is incredibly important. As you say, going right back to basics. I mean, I think we in many ways have slowed down and sped up at the same time, haven't we? I mean, I'm sure you sit on your Zoom far more than you ever did before, because you're not moving between meetings. So in a way, things have got tighter, but that deliberate, intentional, right, I'm going to get outside now. I'm going to, what's the important part of boosting energy, productivity at a time when, that's been a challenge for a lot of people. So I think bringing this into our consciousness and really thinking, right, what have we learned? What do we want to keep as we move forward? And that connection to nature, which so many people have said, is important through the pandemic. Let's capitalize on that and take that through, in the months and year ahead, as whatever's going to happen happens.
Yeah. Have you got a sense of sort of mental health issues over the last year and kind of what's been happening and what some of the effects? Yeah.
So I mean, the probably the key figure is that the Centre for Mental Health, which is one of the key research bodies, has shown that they think that 8.5 million more adults are going to need mental health support as a result of COVID-19, and 1.5 million children. So another 10 million people are going to need that mental health support as we come out of or move into the next stage, or as a result of COVID-19. I think it was 7 in 10 people said that they felt worried or very worried about the effects of COVID-19 is having on their lives, and that's an Office of National Statistic stat. And then, people are obviously worried about the future. People are saying that they're feeling stressed and anxious, and also feeling board. But I think you've got then, financial well-being, you've got concerns about health, you've got concerns about, whether people are concerned about other family members or about their own health. You've got parents who might be worried about their children and their schooling. There's a whole raft of things. And then you've got people for whom everyday life has just continued, but illnesses, divorce, separation, all of those things that have happened, and at a time where we haven't been able to be connected with people. So lots of people have had to deal with quite extraordinary set of circumstances, which would be challenging in any time, but doing it, without the physical support. And I think it is important, when we talk about social distancing, of course, what we try to do is to keep connected, at the same time as recognizing that people are not physically close, or haven't been able to be physically close. But I think we and I guess that some of this is now, how do people respond as we move forward? But one of the key bits which we're really clear about, Martin, is that we need to keep checking in with each other, keep checking in with ourselves. I don't know if one of my colleagues has forwarded it to you already, but we've got a My Whole Self sort of MOT check-in tool, which is about how we check in with ourselves, because quite often we might be more attuned to the fact that our knee's hurting than the fact that we don't feel 100%, or that we are mentally unwell. And so again, that sort of MHFA England's real drive is for people to be thinking consciously about their mental health, their well-being. So we've got this tool, which, if it hasn't been sent to you already, I can send you the link, or get a link sent to you, which helps people to stop, think about what's happening, and then think about whether they might need support for themselves, and of course then that check-in with other people as well.
Because I think that is a problem that a lot of people have, isn't it, of not really understanding, or perhaps not having the time, or maybe the issues they have might be so immense that it's something that you kind of almost put to one side. So in that sense, do you think that there's potential here for some good to kind of come out of this situation? It has obviously been a period of perhaps reflection where people have had to really deal with themselves a lot more. So do you think in that sense, maybe becoming a bit more attuned to sort of mental health problems? Are you sort of positive?
Yeah, I do. I think that we've really, if I think about my work life, my personal life, and my family life, it's clear that we are all checking in, much more with each other, and people telling the truth. I think that's or at least more so than perhaps they would before. And I think when that is true of an enormous number of people, and we've learned to understand that we can talk about the ups and downs, that we can check in with each other, that it does some good to check in with ourselves, to slow down and look. And actually, once you've had that, we can't look back. That's the really important part of this. And I think, that of course, there's all sorts of gendered expectations about who talks, how they talk, what conversations people have. But I do think that, a little bit like ecstasy in the 90s, which changed some of the gendered sort of relations. You've also got, some of that here, that people are really clear about the fact that mental health is something that impacts on all of us. It's not a 1 in 4 people or 1 in 6 people. It's, we've all got minds, we've all got our well-being, and we need to know and understand and support that. And I think that change, of course, things will shift as we move through, but that is one of the changes which I think will drive us forward here, that people will continue to talk about mental health, people will continue to talk about well-being, people will continue to think about work and the impact of work and work-life balance. Things like going back to the office. There's some momentous sort of things which I think will inevitably continue as we look to the future.
So flexible working, perhaps, or at least more time spent at home, more time with family. That's gonna.
There's much more hybrid working. That sense of trust, I think, are all things. If you think about, whether that's digital transformation or people transformation, and things which people have been working at for a long time, were forced on us, in many ways, for people who had to work from home. And we know that, organisations, including us, are going, right, what does the future look like? We can't just go back to the past. It's what we learned, what do we want to keep, what we lost, what do we need to build into the future? And that's, about well-being and equity, and performance, not one or the other of those.
Yeah. And so does that mean that there's also, more institutional support then around this? Workplaces are having to address these matters, as a sort of result of this year in some ways?
Yeah, so what we know is that Chartered Institute of Personnel Development showed that wellbeing budgets have increased. Our own evidence shows that a significant proportion of employers have really addressed mental health and employee wellbeing, including through skilling up or training more mental health first aiders, or taking part in campaigns like this week to try and raise awareness and building some of that into line manager training and support, because they know that it's important, and because they know that it matters, and because the employees have said that it matters, and people have had to be flexible. And once, and again, it's that sort of piece, isn't it, that knowing that you've had check in on well-being, that you've had to try and train and skill up your workforce to have better awareness, your line managers to be able to have better conversations, and to have first aiders to support people in the workplace. That will inevitably continue, because it becomes part of the culture. That it becomes part of the accepted norm to really be wanting to support employee well-being. It's part of productivity, part of good performance, in the same way that diverse workforces improve performance, so do workforces that feel looked after and are well looked after. And that's not just, of course, well-being programs. It's also making sure that we are thinking about how do we design jobs properly so that people can do them well enough. How do we make sure that you've got the right skills and tools to be able to do the roles? And I think where there's some rub in this is, of course, people have had to work harder, people have had caring responsibilities, people have been working where others have been furloughed, people have been doing it from their kitchen tables and all sorts of things. So all of those challenges become part of the sort of the solutions which organisations are now looking for, which has to involve staff in these processes as well. But I guess that goes right back, doesn't it, to this, which is really the whole bit about things like Mental Health Awareness Week, is ensuring that we're having the conversations so that people can be thinking about it. Because it would be, 10 years ago, it would have been unlikely that we'd have been having this conversation. And so it's like, okay, so we are where we are now. And that's great, we've moved forward, but we've now got to make sure we sustain and build on that in order to achieve change.
Yeah. As you said, obviously mental health conversation has been much more visible in the last sort of few years. I mean, how much from your point of view have you noticed that and started to understand that? Has it been quite astonishing sort of,
Yeah, I mean, so it is brilliant. If you think about the initiatives that have happened, so in construction, in financial services, there are some really big recognition initiatives around well-being, trade unions, identifying mental health, all of those sorts of things, and that's absolutely brilliant. I think what we have to not kid ourselves about is that we are anywhere near addressing the stigma, the inequality, and the challenges, and that we've got to really think about this from a systemic sort of basis. We know that social, yes, mental health doesn't, or mental illness doesn't discriminate, but actually we know that inequalities, whether an oppression, social, economic, physical inequalities impact on mental health and well-being, and they've been amplified through COVID. So come an enormously long way, but actually looking to the future we know that there's an enormous amount to do. And the stigma, we did some research last year, which showed that people would rather talk to their manager about their diarrhea than about depression. And in 25 years of working, I've never felt the need to talk to my manager about diarrhea. But if the idea that people would still be more comfortable doing that shows, I think, just how far we've got to go before we're in a place where people are as confident talking about their mental health as they are about their physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, because I think statistically it does show, doesn't it? If you're in the poorest regions of the country, you're much more likely to have a mental health issue or related issues to mental health. Is that true?
Well, I guess it's certainly things. There were, if you think about financial well-being or about opportunity, so it's tightly connected into inequality. But so you've got that sort of piece that it both. If you think about stress and the impact of, so mental health first aid in England, we talk a lot about the stress container. That we've all got stress container. You think about a bath, and you may be able to cope with it, right up to the top. But there is a moment which is, actually this is too much, and that might be that much for you or that much for you, and might experience the same. So it's the, what is the actual event? What is our experience of that? And what's the effect of it on you, and where some of those, where you might be able to access help and support, or where you may have a workplace employee program, or where you might have an intergenerational family structure. There are all sorts of things which can impact on your experiences of poor mental health, and we know that it does tie in with things like poverty, inequality. Think about the experience of racism. If you are living with depression, or racism, we know LGBT young people more likely to experience mental health inequalities. And it's not, of course, that it is the individuals. It's about systemic problems and the context and the way that support may or may not be accessed, which impacts on that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think that's why it feels, of such an important issue, but also quite an exciting issue to look at mental health in this way, because you are dealing not just with mental health, but other issues as well. Everything seems to be impacted by it. And so you can you can get into these issues in quite a personal way with people. People can connect with it, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think so. And I think part of the point about this is about us becoming more literate as a society and becoming more confident and comfortable. And that is absolutely right back to the core mission of Mental Health First Aid England, where we want to train 1 in 10 of the adult population, because we want to create the culture change which enables people to know how to have conversations about mental health, to understand the impact of stigma, to understand signs and symptoms, and then to be able to signpost people to support, because it is the cultural change which will enable us to make the difference. And sometimes we think about mental health as a health issue. It is a social justice issue. It is an inequalities issue. It is really something which is about right at the core of humanity. So when you talk about being personal, it is our body and mind are completely interconnected, but our experience of who we are and how we are, is at the heart of who we are, which is why, that close connection to nature, as well, our humanity, and then the awe and inspiring of nature is a heady mix, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And what about the relationship between, men and mental health? Because it's often seen to me that that talking to men about mental health, you're also talking about masculinity, because it's not just mental health, it's the difficulties they have in opening up about mental health, which is to do with ideals about being a man. That also opens up that conversation, I feel. It
does, absolutely. I mean, I think, we have such gendered expectations, don't we, of people? So we grow up with this sort of sense of what is the right sort of man, and how do we how do you live up to that? And of course most people can't, because that's the all-knowing, all tough, completely independent bloke, and there aren't that many human beings who can live up to that. So that sort of sense of not believing that, or not valuing asking for help, or as boys learning that you don't ask for help, is something which we've really got to unlearn. It's something which we've got to actively seek to change, in order that we can create a society where men and women can get help. And it's all linked up, isn't it? With if you think about the sexism, misogyny, patriarchal institutions, whichever lens you look at it, it doesn't. The irony of it is that the status quo doesn't help men and men's mental health, but it also doesn't help and clearly is damaging for everybody, because it means that people will either perpetuate the existing power structures, or won't seek help, or will and violence and abuse is often connected into other issues around individual feelings of insecurity, or whatever it is. So I think it's all really tightly interconnected, and we know obviously that high levels of suicide rates amongst men as well, which and that's why it's so important that we actively talk about mental health being an issue which affects everybody, because often if you don't talk about it affecting everybody, then people think it affects everybody else, so they feel like they're the outsider and they're really alone. And I think been a number of initiatives over time which is targeted, so we need wholesale culture change, but to achieve that we're also going to need some targeted interventions which really tackle stigma that's associated with gender and with masculinity.
What have you seen that has particularly worked with men? Is there anything in particular, any particular approaches that particularly seems to sort of hit home?
I think the most important piece is actually making sure that men know that it is for them. So Ford, if you look on YouTube, did a advert which was, I think it's called The Elephant in the Room. It's before I was at MHFA England, but it was really about recognising the demographic of their workforce, and then that sort of trying to break down the taboo. So I think it's finding ways to make sure that if you or I are watching it, that it's talking to me, it's not talking, or it's talking to us, it's not talking to somebody else. Then finding ways to talk about it in ways which are perceived to be acceptable. Obviously things we know that now, as you've got things on a phone, used to have things which are on the back of a toilet door, which would be public health messages, because that's where somebody might be able to see it in private. But now of course you've got that phone, but onto the phones. But we know Time to Change did some work which specifically targeted men. Lots of health promotion departments have done that, which really talked to men specifically. The construction sector have done it. So it's really that bit of saying this is an issue which affects us all. This is an issue which men absolutely need to talk about, and then trying to connect and find ways which feel acceptable, and you get the entry point. Is it Roman Kemp did the TV program recently, and obviously that sort of high profile awareness really works. We know in businesses that leaders, when they've spoken openly about mental health, that has been a catalyst for change within organizations. So there are lots of men in the professional services sector that have talked about their experiences of poor mental health. So I think the visibility is probably the most important thing, Martin, really, that people see it, believe it's relevant, it feels relevant, believe it's speaking to them, it feels relevant when they are being spoken to. I'm speaking at Sky Sports News later today. It's getting into those environments where there will be lots of that demographic, lots of men, demographic, and then getting the messages through.
Yeah.
Probably the same as smoking, drinking. You probably had these conversations about all sorts of issues. Have you had public health issues before? Same sort of principle.
Yeah. Just final thing. So you're not an organisation that's just around for this week. You do are here all the time.
Yeah.
So what else do you have sort of this year? What's the focus sort of beyond this week as well?
So one of the key things our core vision is that training 1 in 10 of the adult population. That's what all of our work is around doing. So we are a training organisation, training mental health first aiders, training people, line managers. There's digital courses, awareness courses, but we're also running a campaign called My Whole Self, which is and I'll send you the link. And that's really about saying that if we want people to be able to operate sort of on the edge of their brilliance, that you need an environment where people feel welcome and valued, and their mental health is understood to be a key part of them. And that's an ongoing campaign. We doing a lot of work around being actively anti-racist as an organisation, and we'll be launching a new product around race and racism and mental health shortly. So a whole raft of things, but really, that core bit of trying to create an environment where everybody feels able to talk about mental health, know and get the support, and to change workplaces, because I think that workplace is an incredibly important place to reach people, and then you've got that ripple effect out into communities and families.